Hey there, my handsome and pretty little Cobras, and welcome back to the Cobra's Nest. For those of you who are new, my name is Mignon Cobra, and I make minimalist videos. Today's video is going to be another minimalism problem, how to stop counting your stuff. I have 5 tips on how to get out of that. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. Let's get it, let's go. Woo! Okay, first I'm just going to quickly do a rapid fire as to why I don't think counting your stuff is all that helpful. Number 1, counting your stuff means that you are still ruled by your stuff. Which brings us into point number 2. It's not about the amount of stuff that you own. Rather, what's your relationship to the things? They are just tools to serve you. Number 3, when you are ruled by the number, you forget about the object itself and what it actually means to you and what you're using this tool for, as opposed to just something that you want to continue counting. Number 4, items should be regarded for their value, not their numerical value. An example that I can give of this is if in a week you have 7 pairs of socks, it would make sense to have 7 pairs of socks as opposed to telling yourself you can only have 1 pair of socks because you can't have duplicates. Alright, so let's look at the 5 tips on what to do if you are stuck counting your stuff. Number 1, look at the item's value to you. Ask yourself the question, is this practical, necessary, or beautiful? An item does not need to be all 3. There's a period of time in my minimalism journey I thought things needed to be a Swiss Army knife of both. Like of practical, necessary, and beautiful. Some things were just not meant to be. They're not meant to be all 3 things. If they are, that's amazing, but you don't have to get rid of something if it doesn't meet all 3 criterions. I think that if an item meets at least 1 criterion, it's worth having, or it's okay to have. You can have something that is beautiful, but maybe it's not practical or necessary, but at the end of the day, minimalism is just a tool to help better your life, and why shouldn't we have beautiful things in our life? Just as why can't we keep something that's practical even though it may be but ugly? Number 2, there's nothing wrong with duplicates. I know that in the minimalism community, there's a really big push for don't have duplicates, and they're guidelines, not rules that cannot be broken. The rules can be bent. I think somewhere along the line in your minimalism journey, you too will find the right finesse of what is actually just a duplicate and what are things that are similar but serve different functions. And I think it's perfectly okay to keep duplicates. An example I can think of is a lot of minimalists have the same sock and they'll have it in, say, 8 pairs. So are those socks duplicates? Are you supposed to have a different colored sock so you don't run into the duplicate problem? So you can kind of start to see where the gray zone of this no duplicate rule starts to get into. So I don't think there's anything wrong with duplicates. I think it's understanding what function the duplicates are serving. Then it's perfectly okay, and you shouldn't get caught up in the number and think, I can only have 1 of it. Number 3, be reasonable. How stoic do you want to be? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be more stoic. I think all the power to you. I think it's a beautiful journey to go on and figure out how little you can live with. But at the same time, I think it's also important to be reasonable. There's a period of time in my journey, in the middle of my minimalism journey, before I started my YouTube channel, I got really obsessed with how little I could own, and I started making really irrational and unreasonable decisions. I got rid of all of my bags. I was unfortunately forced to have to carry around my stuff in a plastic bag. There's nothing wrong with having a plastic bag for a bag, but I wasn't being reasonable. So I think that if you start to enter this realm of where you start to question and think, are you making your life more difficult than it needs to be, then perhaps being a little bit more reasonable will make your life a lot better. Minimalism, again, is also just a tool. You don't need to make your life that much more difficult. That's not the point of minimalism. The point of minimalism is not to own 5 items and live in hell. Number 4, we make mistakes when we declutter. Forgive yourself and move on. Repurchase it if it's really killing you. This one is something that I've made a mistake about. I have made mistakes and I didn't forgive myself about it. I kept dwelling on the mistake and thinking how I could go back in time and fix it, and why did I make that mistake? If I could do it again, I wouldn't even make that mistake. But the beautiful thing about mistakes is they're actually disguised as lessons to learn. The most important thing is to realize that your mistake is actually a lesson. Learn from it, forgive yourself, and move on. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with counting your stuff? Sometimes the things that we do and the obsessions that we get is actually to compensate for something else. So I'll give an example for myself. When I used to be a very big maximalist and I owned a lot of purses, to compensate for this mistake of having over purchased more purses than I thought was appropriate during my early minimalism days, and I thought back, I took out my anger and guilt on my purses. So I had no purses, and it was because I couldn't forgive myself. So I said I can't own any purses, and I owned 0 purses. Look at what you're doing. I think maybe if you are counting your things, it might be because you're trying to hold on to some guilt or something. Forgive yourself and let yourself have a little bit of excess, a little bit of more in your life, and just move on. They're just things. And number 5, you will find that good place of number of stuff. I think that this is a very common thing that a lot of people get into, especially when they start to reap the benefits of minimalism and they're really enjoying it and they think, you know what, it's all been good so far, I'm just going to keep going. And then before you know it, you start counting how many things you have and you start thinking, you know what, before I owned 100 items and now I only own 50 items. Life's only going to get better when I own 25 items, and it just becomes kind of like this vicious cycle. And I don't think this is any different from dieting. You get really excited and happy when you lose the first initial pounds and you keep going, and then before you know it, you start having health complications, and you're actually better off putting on a little bit of weight to help your health. So I think it's the same thing with minimalism. You're just going to keep going and going to a place that maybe you're counting your stuff and you're not really that happy and your life's just, subpar and it's not optimal, and you'll eventually reintroduce things back into your life and you will find that optimal level, and you'll find that sweet spot, that good spot where you're supposed to be. And again, you will only find that with trial and error, but don't be afraid to reintroduce things back into your life, because honestly, the point of minimalism is not to be counting your stuff. I mean, at least I don't think that's what it is, and I don't think many people do think that it is, but I'm not here to shame anybody. Honestly, if counting your stuff brings you joy, I'm really happy, and I really do wish you the best of luck. But if you are watching this video because you feel that you're counting your stuff and you're not really all that happy, just want to let you know that there's other things you can use minimalism for, and you don't have to be trapped in this idea that less is more and you constantly need to have less and less and less and stuck in the decluttering obsession. You can let go of that. Alright, so we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!